Welcome back to the American Recovery Podcast. Feel free to leave a comment, like this video, or subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, Rumble, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Enjoy the show. John, tell us your recovery story.
Oh, well, it started out, I'll get into a little bit of where I was at when I hit rock bottom to want to get clean. I was in a basement. I'm just like most stories. Most people are either homeless or whatever. You know, me and my now wife was just girlfriend back then. We were using and in and out of backseat to backseat with our children. We were eventually staying at a motel, and thank God that somebody turned us in because we were using drugs. We were in a hotel, and it was a family member. So DSF stepped in and took the kids. They actually, it was while Ashley was actually just had Caleb. That's another story. Ashley just had Caleb, and she was still at the hospital. He was 2 days old, and they called for a well check and to come and get the kids. Well, so the state took the kids, and we were just lost and confused for a while. We ended up going deeper into our addiction, and it took some time, and finally pulling our heads out of our butts, and we realized that we needed our kids, and our kids needed us. I think it was more we needed our kids. They were perfectly fine in the placement that they were in. We are actually now really good friends with the foster parents, but yeah, so I had actually left my girlfriend at the time, which is now my wife, and I just told her I have to get clean. I got to get our kids back, and I moved in with her dad. And then finally, I think it might have been later on that day or the next day. I don't know. That's a foggy area also. So it was my first day clean, and I don't know where we heard about NA, Narcotics Anonymous. We found it because it was just later on that day or the next morning. Heck, it could have been an 8-hour difference that she finally followed over to her dad's. And we started that long journey of just trying to do whatever it took to get clean, and stay clean. We went to like 3 meetings a day. Heck, I think a year straight, because they called and they said, if you don't, this is it. They had already had our kids for, I think, 10 months at the time, almost a year. And they said they were going to pull the plug and have it to where they could be adopted. It just scared me. So I grew up a whole lot with not having my dad around. And then he overdosed when I was 18. And also my wife's dad, or it wasn't an overdose, but it was just lack of taking care of himself from addiction that he ended up passing away to a few months before our wedding. But mostly the drive for us to get clean was our kids. And after we made that decision, man, it took a lot of support. Like my mom, thankfully for my mom and her dad. Her dad he was wild too, but he had enough respect for us to make sure that he always kept drugs away from us while we were getting clean. And then we kept going to NA for a while, and then we bought a house out a little distance away from NA. It was just harder to get there, so we just continued on trying to work in the public and do everything we could to give back. And so she's an RN for a treatment center. We also like to just serve on panels for KVC and do everything that, help others. We're parent advocates now. And but to get there, it wasn't it wasn't easy, man. It's every day was a struggle of just telling ourselves no. And like a lot of it does intertwine with her, because heck, I've been an addict for, I'm 35 now, so I'd say 26 years. I mean, I started off abusing Adderall when I was a little kid, and it just progressed. I think there might have been areas of times in my life I stopped and switched to other things, but in one way or another, it was always something that filled the void of whatever it was. And it's still to this day, that's still something I'm trying to live with and learn how to cope with the void being there, because it's always going to be there. I've been on Adderall. I was on Adderall since I was in 4th grade. However old but I started abusing, and I didn't like abuse it until I hit 12. to 13 years old until it was a certain crowd I was just around, and that just led to everything else. So a lot of people say marijuana is a gateway drug. My gateway drug was doctors prescribing me medicine.
That's more common than a lot of people recognize. Marijuana, if they were smart, they would have never labeled marijuana the gateway drug. What I learned in my time in prevention was any addictive substance is a risk factor for others. So alcohol, marijuana, Adderall, there's a whole lot of ways people can get into addictive substances. A lot more of them are doctor prescribed or at least socially acceptable than what we like to think. People jump right to, oh, heroin and cocaine and meth. And it's like, yeah, like those exist. But we told people that Adderall is, or ADHD medications consist of one of four amphetamine based salts. And we said, by the way, if you get your kids on this, it is like you are giving your kid a version of methamphetamine. We don't have that conversation. They just go, oh, well, if you don't have a problem, it speeds you up. And if you do have a problem, it slows you down. But it's still an addictive substance. They neglect that. And the data shows us that the earlier in age, prior to 18, especially closer to 14 and younger, people start any kind of addictive substance, the likelihood that is a lifetime problem or something that ultimately kills them is substantially higher. And they don't have that conversation with parents when they go, hey, is your young elementary school age child acting like a boy because he's a boy and they have energy and they don't sit down well in classrooms? They don't have that conversation from an honest standpoint. They just go, oh, kid's disruptive. It must be this. And it's a huge gap in our medical community that is, I think, doing a disservice. And I think your situation is kind of, apropos in this conversation because we don't think about it. But if the kid has access and the kid has influence outside of mom and dad, that would drive them towards using more. Or so they misunderstand the depth to which it can be a problem, especially when you start them at incredibly young ages. And they will prescribe that to kids way too young, in my opinion. And so, Adderall, and tell me about how you went from I'm on this medication to now. Talk about that time frame where you were working with or hanging out with your brother's older friends and how that sort of transitioned you from, yeah, I take Adderall for this to now I'm taking this recreationally, so to speak.
So back then, I remember hanging out with they were actually in there, and some of their friends were thieves, and we're hanging out and just being. I thought it was a normal thing, So I started selling my Adderall to them and stuff, and then some every now and then I'd either be out or something, and here comes meth, all right, and which introduced amphetamines to me a little bit younger. So my mom sent me off to live with my grandpa because I started getting a little too wild about around 14. From what I can remember, it was just a long slur of hanging out with the older crowd and a bunch of females. It so I was poor growing up. We barely had a pot to piss in, and which we got by, but and there was one meal a day. There was some people get breakfast, lunch, and dinner in their life. We grew up with one meal. I would sell my Adderall to either buy my new, because I played a lot of sports, to buy my gym shoes or something. My basketball shoes, my football cleats. All the stuff that you would think a normal kid would have. I didn't. I had to hustle to get that. And my mom was always on a fixed income. She'd been disabled since I was freaking young. And so around that time, I mean, all that was going on around that time. Starting to be a teenager, and I wanted more things. I plus with the crowd that I was around, seeing some of the stuff that they had, and they were hustlers, dealing whatever it may be. And I just thought that was a life to live. So I started living that life, and I think I was good for about a year when I lived with my grandpa. He done some times in federal prison. So that's why she sent me there to live with him so I could get my act right, and he'd either thump me or whatever it may be, thinking that this little boy's, because I was smart. I was really smart, and I was very athletic, and let's say a little bit more so than all my other brothers. I have 3 brothers, 2 sisters, two stepbrothers and a stepsister. And so there's a lot of us. And for the most part, my stepbrothers and sisters didn't live with us. It was just us boys in a FEMA trailer. And so that's three small little rooms, four boys and two adults. And so it ended up just being basically party central all the time. Because if I have a friend over, he can have a friend over, and he can have a friend over, and he can have a friend over. Now we have plenty of friends over, and we were never good. I don't know. I really just don't even understand, probably till this day, of why I always thought that I had to be some type of gangster or something because my grandpa was. So my kids got taken by the state. I don't understand how I was never taken by the state when I was a kid, right? Um, it was bad. I really don't even ever know how I made it even to class or school half the time, other than thinking that my girlfriend went to school there. But even then, I would come in school smelling of drugs and cause a lot of problems for me also. I'd get kicked off the team. Heck, my coaches were my teachers, and after losing sports or something like that, for as a kid, for me it was just like, screw it. I guess I was a lot younger than a lot of people even start doing drugs and stuff. So I started smoking marijuana when I was like 15, right? Nowadays that's a normal. It really is, but back then it really wasn't a normal for some 14, 15-year-old to be walking around with you know a lot of pot. It just it wasn't normal back then. So after that, I just started hustling a lot of marijuana, which now it's legal. It's crazy. And then that just progressed into, this is smaller, you can hide it. So I progressed into other things, and let's say about 16 now. So that through that time period, I guess I come back from my grandpa's. I was about 15, 16. I had already hit puberty, my voice changed. Now I think I'm the man, and I guess I don't think my mentality ever changed going from my grandpa's. Now I just come back from living with my grandpa that had done multiple fed times and stuff like that. So now I think I'm even cooler. And it progressed worse. And then I started stealing stuff. Not just like stealing stuff to steal it because I was broke or anything, just because they had it. I'd steal stuff that was so stupid, just from people that were, it felt like they were just trying to show off. So then this era of my life started where I was jacking cars and stuff. Okay. And then so that was about 16, 17. I got into a decent car wreck, and then I started using pain pills, and so I know the whole prescription thing and how to play it by this time, because I had already been playing my doctor for my Adderall for years. And I think after that, and just using the painkillers and stuff, which I didn't even know back then about withdrawal and stuff from pain pills, like the effects of it, and not one bit. I mean, when I tell you not one bit, not at all. I just thought you took this thing. It's kind of like I always thought it was like taking a energy pill or something, like my Adderall, but like there were days that I didn't take my Adderall, and I was fine. I was like, I did feel a little bit off, but I wouldn't withdraw. I wasn't going through pains like that. I wouldn't. So after doing a lot of pain pills where I wasn't getting prescriptions anymore, it was just like a couple prescriptions and a few refills. And I didn't want to play the whole go from county to county to different doctors. I know people that I didn't end up doing that. So then my mom was prescribed methadone for freaking a long time. So then came my methadone kick. That was at least about 17 and a half. I wasn't 18 yet. It was my prime 17 years. So I was addicted to methadone for, I don't even recall fully on how long, because I blacked out months of my life with methadone and Xanax. It was just a flurry of hanging out with people and waking up again and not even halfway knowing who was around. So that was about 17. I broke in to a place because it wasn't more of it was somebody owed me money, and I went to get my money. That ended me up in jail for 3.5 years, in KJCC, Kansas Juvenile Correctional Complex. So I was 17 and a half, and I went on the run. They caught me. I was an adult now, and so they were threatening on sending me to do big boy time. And which, since I did it as a juvenile, my lawyer got it down to where I went as a juvenile, and but I ended up doing 3.5 years, and then I came out, and that's when me and my wife started hooking up. We knew each other from high school. Me and her older sister was really good friends in high school, and which forced her around me. And lo and behold, she was the preppy girl, and I was the gangster guy, or wannabe. I look at people like that now, and it's different. But compared to how I used to be. So she ended up coming into the picture, I think, like 3 days after I get out of jail, which now I've actually been clean for 3.5 years, right? And on this whole workout kick and being right and doing good, and then alcohol came into my life. All right. I am now, of course, 21. I can buy alcohol and stuff because I just spent almost 4 years in KJCC. And so I started drinking, and then I think after I got off probation, I had started slowly getting back into other things. It was probably just the alcohol. It was something else to fill that void because it's always there. And we started slowly misusing pain pills again. So this time it took a little bit longer to get deeper into it now because I got somebody telling me I can't do it. I got my girlfriend in my ear saying no or whatever. I think after I got her into it, it was on. I had no one else to tell me no. I'm an adult. My mom barely ever had any control over me. My dad damn sure didn't. He wasn't ever. I mean, he was around, but like they were separated, and it was sometimes it was to get around to see him, and who knows, that could have been that void. To be honest, till this day, I don't know.
I heard someone describe addiction as solution to fill the gap left by a missing connection or to fill a loss or a void in somebody's life. And so you kind of mentioned that with your dad. And you think between that, you think of anything else that was going on in your life that you're like, I might have been plugging that hole with substances too.
I mean, other than growing up being poor, I mean, I don't know. My mom tried, she did the best she could with. I mean, because when I tell you, me and my brothers were hell. We grew up in a small town in Elwood, Kansas, right? A graduating class of like freaking 12 people, I grew up in a nice, quiet town, somewhere that I feel safe to even let my kids go and play at the park without watching him, like that type of safe. Like people ain't gonna come up and take my kid. I know everybody from around here type of thing. I don't know. I mean, the only other thing I could think of is just probably never ever really being around my dad or having that. My mom's been married like 4 times. So, I mean, but I don't know. Who knows? I mean, I fully don't understand sometimes because even in NA meetings and stuff like that, you always hear there's that void, like once you get clean, dude. I mean, it starts getting smaller though, right? Like eventually you pack in so much stuff into your life, you barricade yourself with busy, 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 right? Like if I keep doing this and I keep going here, I have no time to use. I have no time to think about my problems or worry about my problems. And now we got our kids back, right? Like we had a big deep end for a long time. We got our kids back, and I think that a routine helps. I'm not going to say it's going to fully fill that void, but I know there's a whole lot more out there in life that's beautiful and precious, that's there to enjoy, not just drugs, stuck in some basement. uh I want to leave a legacy. I want to leave, which my kids are my legacy, but I want to leave something behind, and not just that I was a drug addict loser that never did anything with his life. And I gotta be okay with being a loser, but I don't want to be a drug addict anymore. An active drug addict. I will always be an addict, but It really helps with a super strong support system. And I mean, that doesn't mean a lot of people because due to support, it could just be one person telling you, or good job, you're doing it, man. And I think just for somebody to believe in somebody could be enough. And the way to be honest, recovery is growing and it's getting bigger. And when we got clean eight. I'm not the greatest with the dates, but it's like 8, 9 years ago we got clean. And back then when I got clean, I literally was trying to, like, I felt like I was a preacher, right? Everybody was like, dude, preach, chill out. Because I was just like, dude, you guys can too, like, and I always said if for us to get clean, it was going to take a movement, like a movement. And I meant just like our friends, my closest group of people that I can count on that I love to get clean. And if a few of us can do it and contain a strong circle, we can all do it, and then broaden our circle, keep going bigger. How many more lives can we touch? And sometimes I think it's just the problem with NA is the anonymity, like I love NA to death, dude. I'll never knock it ever. It saved my life. But I think the anonymity part is screwing a lot of other people that don't get a chance to make it into an NA room, because a lot of our stories are going to be the same. There's going to be so many things, even in my story. So my first time going to an NA meeting, I ain't even got to bring up who it is or anything. I never even walked in. I was there scared, and this dude was saying my story, right? But it was his story, and he kept going, and I sat outside of that room bawling, and it was probably the lowest I had ever felt in my life, and I was hearing it from him, not me. I'd lived it, but it was the same exact story. So I just listened and then I walked away. But that was probably one of the hardest. I mean, I'll remember that day forever. And I was clean for like a few days before that, but just hearing that, it was that there was other people out there. I think that's the problem that a lot of people just don't get to see, is that there's a lot of people in recovery. But if we keep it just in NA rooms, it's never going to grow.
That's one of the areas I'm hoping to address, because I understand why some people need that anonymity, and I also agree. I think
What? Yeah.
it's connections that can be made by being this vulnerable. Like that's like hearing about your first NA meeting, like knowing you were days into it. That was gonna be my next question. Is like, was that day one? Was that like how many days were you in? So knowing you were only a few days into it, and the first story you're hearing as you're stepping into an NA meeting sounds like somebody carbon copied yours. I don't think you can replace that relatability. Do you remember how long that person had been in recovery when they were given their story?
Oh yeah, I know exactly who it is, because after that day I went up and I'd actually talked to the guy, like, and I was like, dude, you moved me, I think he'd been clean for like a year and a half at that point, and he was in there bawling his eyes out, telling his story, and it was just all the words that I wish I could say. Like my failures, the struggle and addiction, everything. He sat there and talked for, you're only supposed to get so much time, sharing time in NA, because it was just a random day, we're just going around, they were going around a circle, and I just happened to get upstairs when it felt like he talked for 30 minutes, but he shared for 5 minutes, dude, and it was my story. So he was clean about a year and a half. He's still clean to this day. I still follow him. He's doing great. I got pretty close with those people, and they ended up turning into family, man. And that's kind of what helped for the longest time. Just even getting out and realizing there's groups of people that go out and do stuff without drugs or alcohol. Like that was a big thing for me. Like everywhere you go, you can't even almost go to a restaurant without there being alcohol. I don't drink anymore. And I think after I got clean, I tried to a few times, and it was a bad outcome. I just can't handle. I ended up being, I'd say, a little sobbing girl. My wife and my kids, like, oh, I love you. Like, but I didn't like that. My kids seeing me drunk or even high. That's something I don't want them to ever have to go through.
That little bit of drinking, was that sort of an attempt at moderation versus total abstinence, or was that a disconnect between?
Probably thinking that I had it under control, which I highly no, I don't have anything under, especially with alcohol. I knew from after we got clean, I never wanted to go back to any other substance, But so I tried to drink a couple times, and it wasn't even like super heavy. It was enough that it was heavy enough for me, but yeah, but it was just like out, just like I said, for dinner. Had a couple drinks with some family that was in town from out of town, and yeah, just one thing led to another.
Wasn't the experience you were anticipating.
Yeah, I finally recently just allowed my older brother to be back in mine and my family's life. So he was on that fentanyl stuff for a while, and he actually got busted. And sometimes it does take jail. It's jail's institutions of death, or there is recovery. So he got jail, and he's still looking at quite a lot of time, but he's been doing pretty good. He's staying in an Oxford house in Topeka, Kansas, and he's doing pretty good. So I told him, once you get clean, man, and that's what you want with your life, not just get clean because we want you to get clean. Once you're ready for a change, then my kids can be around you. But until then, so he recently started coming around, which is all right. But me and him are probably the worst at getting along ever.
So what else you kind of had your experience with alcohol as you were in recovery and recognized that, okay, that's not something I can step into. It doesn't work with the life that I'm trying to live now. What other things do you specifically avoid doing, or places you avoid going, people you avoid seeing? What all do you do
Well,
different?
I honestly, nowadays, I don't try to avoid anything because I'm comfortable where I'm at in life. I'm truly comfortable where I'm at. Like, I don't barely talk to anybody. Now I work. I come home, have the time I sleep my life away. I feel like now, third shift life. I'm I'm comfortable now. It took a longest time for me to be comfortable in my own skin and be okay with the person in the mirror. 'Cause I've done some pretty messed up stuff in my life, man. Like to other people, to family members, to myself. The biggest part was myself, but I think losing my kids to the state was the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Yeah, I lost my dad to addiction. I've lost a lot of people to addiction. I think at the end of the day, the biggest part for me in my life was the state taking my kid. That goes back to not having my dad around. I always told him I'll be there, and so that's what I did, man. I never looked back. I don't plan on looking back. And so I don't like avoid any people, places, or things anymore. As long as I have my support with me, if my wife's with me, I don't care. I recently was at a old spot that I'd grown up around, and so my whole family used to live on this block, and but there's a lot of drug use that goes on down, and every now and then I like to pop in just so they can see what it's like. I was there with them, I used to do the same stuff with these people, and I feel like if I can at least rub off on a few of them every now and then, which I have. A friend from the same spot got clean. She's been clean for 8 months, and it really almost just took her finding a job and people wanting to help her. She still lives in a trap house, but she's clean. She's doing way, way better than what she used to do, man. It's pretty big. I mean, and I try to tell her that, and I try to rub off on whoever I can, or it don't even matter if I know them, just from what I went through, either with the state or growing up the way I grew up. If I can do it, anybody can do it, and they just got to find their own way to do it. It's not my way or the highway. I wish I owned that highway, but I don't. So it's however you get there. The destination is key. As long as you get there and you don't make it in a pine box or some ashes in somebody's jewelry around their neck that never get to see you again, because that's what it's coming down to these days. So it's kind of that realm. It's opening up of, you got to be careful of anything you do. That one hit could kill you, and you got to be careful, man. If I can touch some people that are just around here in my community that know me, that know the struggles I went through, that's seen me go through it, like growing up in a small town like that, everybody knows everybody, and it was different, and it took a long time to be accepted back into my community. Like, I never got called to come and play alumni ball before, for my school, but now, like, I'm invited to those things. Like it's just that type of thing for me. It's huge. That's just normal people stuff though. But today I get to do those things, and it's cool. And I get to do all different types of things. I get to do that. I get to go to work. I'm not stuck in a basement. I'm not stuck in some trap house. And my kids aren't stuck in foster care. So I'm so happy with where I'm at in life. The going back part to anything, it's almost like you'd have to force me.
That's awesome to hear. I can dig into one part of your story. You said there's about 10-month time frame from when the kids got removed to when when you guys got into recovery. Talk to me about what was going on, just kind of in your heart, in your mind during that time frame, that how it
Well,
affected you and kind of how you turned things around over those 10 months.
that was one of the roughest times of my life. So, like I said, that was the worst time. That's probably the worst thing that's ever happened to me. There's been a lot of bad stuff, but in my eyes, for my kids to leave my custody by police or some other entity, some outside source that's stepping in to tell me I'm not fit to be a dad, or, well, there was a lot of stuff that happened. So I came and took them. My first thought was, I'm going to kill them. All right. My first thought was, I'm going to beat them to the hospital because they were on their way to go take Caleb from the hospital. And if it wasn't for me being so shaky that I couldn't drive, I probably would have, you know. It was 3 or 4 complete strangers taking my kids from me. And so after that day, I just figured there wasn't, because we didn't have any contact. There was no talking to us about what was really going. It happened so fast. The confusion of it sent me deeper into addiction. All right, like I started using drugs intravenously. Right, like I hid it from her for the longest time. So like in that time while we were just kind of getting high and doing things here and there. So the state does DNA tests on the kids and stuff, right? And because Caleb's not biologically my son, and so they did DNA tests, and we were together for a while, and there was a split time that we weren't together, me and my wife now, and that's the time that I'm talking about, which sent me deeper into my addiction, was finding out Caleb wasn't my son, which she got clean, which it was awesome, you know. She got clean. She left me one morning and she went and got clean. But because I was so messed up over Caleb, you know, my brothers were hustlers and stuff. And I was just got into a big, deep depression thing. And I felt like there was no coming out of that hole. I really don't even know how it came to be that I got out. But so me and her, we'd split up for about 5 months. All right. She got clean and was doing good. And then we got back together and started doing really bad together. And like I said, when they called and finally said that this is it, we're going to relinquish your rights to your kids, the state, is finally when I had enough, because I was having dreams and nightmares and stuff of like my kids telling them, you know, saying that I didn't want them, like, and they're being pulled away from me in my dreams, you know, and it was bad. Like it felt pretty bad for me. So that's when I said, when I just got up and left, and that literally just started the journey of staying clean. And then when I finally made that choice to tell everybody I was going to get clean, and then like we were living with my cousin at the time. He wasn't clean, you know, he was in active addiction, but he was strong enough to tell us no, that we weren't going to use because I needed to get my kids back, you know, and that was down to the nitty gritty. If it wasn't probably for my cousin Chris and a few others, I don't know how we would have done it, because we were still around drugs for a while, and we were fighting every day, drug tests twice a week. But so before that, though, when I was by myself, we moved to Kansas City Kansas City, Missouri, and started doing more, right? And the access to it there was a little bit more than what it was where we were living. So now we just had an abundant amount, and it was party central all the time up until finally me and her started talking again. I think that was another part that I was depressed about. Me and her splitting up and just being the whole unsure. I was unsure about life at this point, just because I just found out my 7 to 9 month old son wasn't mine, you know. And I'm still trying to hold this over her head too with a lot of stuff right at this point, until I finally, you know, gave in. And it was just a part of our addiction, what we were doing. We were going back and forth, fighting all the time. And, we came to terms with it, and I was just going to love him as my own. And so then the adoption came up where the foster parents were able to adopt Caleb. And we felt like it was the best way to go because we were just a newly clean couple, right, in recovery and trying to get 3 kids back from the state, right? And we thought that if we brought 3 kids home, we were going to set ourselves up for failure. That just fresh into recovery, just starting on life, our credit scores were down like freaking 300. I don't even know if it can get that low, but it was super duper low. We had nothing, right? We were just starting. The foster parents adopted Caleb, and which we're still part of his life till this day. Our kids and him know their brother and sisters, and this is that. He knows his biological dad. He knows his biological mom, and he just knows that he was adopted by Steve and Sheila, which is a really big part of our story because they helped teach us how to be parents again. They were the foster parents that we got lucky. I mean, there's nightmare stories about foster parents or kids in other care, right? There's all these freaking horror stories, and I think maybe for me that was another reason why I had to do it. But reluctantly, we ended up with the best foster parents you probably could ever ask for. I've probably seen 30 kids go through their home, like myself personally, and they loved every single one of them. So Caleb got adopted, and things were going good. It was going really great. So there was never any really backtracking after we got the other 2 back, and Caleb was adopted, and we just kept pushing forward.
How long into your recovery was the adoption and getting your kids back?
So the adoption happened probably 8 months to a year after we got clean. Because this was still a process. It took us a while to actually get our kids back after we got clean, right? We had to jump, dude. We had to do multiple hair follicle tests, right? Like I only ever heard people doing hair follicle tests for like some freaking Fed stuff, killing people type stuff, and here I am getting hair follicle tests just to make sure I'm not on drugs. But it was that extensive, man. Like me and her, we would walk to and from treatment, right? Which we couldn't afford actual expensive drug and alcohol treatment. So we went to one that was free to the public, right? It's called Family Guidance, which we needed treatment from treatment because there's so many people in there that don't even want to be there. It's they're on probation or parole, and their parole officer or somebody's forced them to be there. But for those few, maybe 4 or 5% in that room that really are grasping for air, trying to save their life, you got to go to NA after to get your treatment. So we were walking to and when I say to and from, I mean treatment was midtown. We were walking from North End all the way to Midtown just to go to treatment because, well, for one, we had to, but we wanted to do everything we needed to do to get our kids back. And I didn't care what that meant. That meant being clean for the rest of my life. I knew that's what it took. But so we started doing treatment, which that was like, frick, I don't even remember how long that program was for. It's probably like a 6-month program, but it's all outpatient. So we did that, and then we would leave straight from treatment and run over and catch an NA meeting in Midtown, and then so just to get treatment from the treatment.
Do you think the element of finality, where they called and said, "This is it. We're coming to you, not just, hey, your kids have been removed. We're coming to you saying, relinquish your rights to the kids." Do you think that finality, people talk about rock bottom, do you feel like that was rock bottom where you said, "This is as far as I go. I have to come back from this"?
Oh yeah, yeah. That was like you just got plummeted like 3 stories under rock bottom for me. Like I was looking up at rock bottom. Like rock bottom. I'm in the basement of rock bottom's house. When I heard that my kids were going to be taken, like they were already taken, but like I wasn't going to get to see them ever again. Yeah, it hit me. And still to this day, it still hits me, just even thinking back on that time and how much stress we were under and how we even managed to do that. It was it was rough, man. I ain't even gonna lie. Those are days that I was about 80% into it while she was 20% out, or fully out, but that other 20% was just barely hanging on enough to tell us no. Sometimes in recovery, being in a relationship ain't always the best thing, but we made it work for us because, like I said, there was days I wanted to use so bad and just say screw it all. But then Ashley would step in and say no. Yeah, regardless, that might have caused a little arguments here and there sometimes. In the long run, we're both grateful for it, and it was just something that had to happen in our recovery for us just to keep going. There was also days though that we wanted to. Okay, I'm not in the beginning stages of our recovery. There was times that we did say screw it, right? But because we had such a good network of people, even people in their active addiction that cared for us, right? Just like cared about us. That if we hit them up to try to get something, they would say no. And that's why I say sometimes, man, it takes a village, dude. Like there's sometimes you're not all you can be. There's gonna be days we'll never live up to our potential ever. I feel that sometimes in life, like there's so much potential in everybody, but I feel like reaching it is you're gonna keep trying to reach, dude, because your potential keeps growing and growing. Yeah.
Do you think that element is common, or how often did you see it where people who were still in active addiction recognized somebody else's rock bottom and became sort of that support and accountability to them? Because I don't think I've ever heard that before, where people in active addiction said, "Dude, you got to do this. There's not like you don't have an option, and I'm not helping you fall off the wagon, so to speak." I think that might be one of the most amazing things I've heard in a recovery story in a while, because that's just not something I thought existed with people who were still
Well,
going through active
Well, so for the longest time, my brother was the plug. All right, my brother was the dope man, and so if he told people no, it was a no. Okay, but regardless, other than that, like my cousin Chris, we lived in his basement. We were in active addiction with him living in his basement, and we started going NA out of his basement, and then I left his house because it was just getting harder and harder, and she would use, and then like there would be like days we'd be clean for a day and then use, and then clean for a day, use, which is usually normally is pretty normal, like people relapse over and over and over before something finally clicks and they stop. Right. But mine was just arguing with her and like realizing that we can't keep doing what we're doing in order to get our kids back. And then I eventually left, and that's when it just started kicking off bigger, because not like the recovery started kicking off bigger because now we're not in a trap house. Thank God for my cousin Chris, because he did tell us no, and he passed away a few years ago from esophageal cancer, but he always told us no, and he said because he'd met my kids and he knew my kids, and he just kept telling us, "Hey, you're going to have to get straight, bud. I mean, I'm not giving you nothing, and nobody else around here is going to give you anything." So,
Was that
I think
in that window of time before they gave you the ultimatum, or was that like in the
no,
days?
no, no, no. That was after they
Oh,
gave us the ultimatum. It was either freaking get your stuff right or they're gone. But up until then, I think that's just not on everybody's mind. That's not their first thought. Is that these people's kids are taken by the state. And when you see them and they're sitting there using, it's not something that you just think about of being like, "Hey, dude, stop your kids," and without sounding pretty crazy. I don't know. But after having multiple breakdowns, because we lived in a trap house, you'd see people we didn't even know would come in, and we'd be sitting there bawling our eyes out because we didn't know what to do. I spent a lot of time at a kitchen table just crying, dude, trying to not knowing how to change my situation, and that was probably it was hard. It was hard to try to accept that I don't know what to do anymore, and what I am doing isn't working. So there's something I got to do, something regardless of whatever it is. If I can try staying clean for a year and nothing gets better, the drugs will always be there. I could always go back, but give this a year. If I can do it for a year and nothing in my life changes and I'm not happier, healthier, and a better father, then, maybe I'll go back to using. But ever since then, we've climbed, and it's kind of a wonderful feeling to actually think back on a lot of the things that had happened because, yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't thought about that in a while.
How long do you think that time period was where after you got the ultimatum from the state and then you were in that that day on day off trying to like come to grips with the fact that what you're doing isn't working, but the road ahead of you is wildly uncertain? How long do you think you were in that sort of back and forth limbo before
It was
ultimately
probably about it was probably about a month of limbo before finally just giving up and leaving my cousin's house to go into her dad's, which nobody was ever there. So it was just a easy dry spot we could be at, without having to worry about saying yes or no to the drugs. And it was like a month of that limbo, and then we went to her dad's, and then it was about, I want to say, maybe 10 months after that. 8 months after that, we got a place. 10 months later, they started doing overnight visits. And then a year after that, so we'd get them on the weekend. And then I think for like the last year, they were living with us, but they were still technically in state custody. I think we were doing that just because of childcare. It was so expensive that the state helped with the childcare. So I think we kind of almost spread it out a little bit longer than some people would have. We just didn't want to set ourselves up for failure. And then we
stuff to lean on. So that was good. I think that's respectable. I don't think the final deadline date of this is when we got the kids back officially on. I think having that piece where you go, we still need help, and so we leaned on the help that was available for as long as we could to ensure we were set up for success. I think that's admirable in every.
Yeah, that's also another reason why Caleb was adopted, and the foster parents together didn't have any kids of their own, and they're older, so it just worked out best. They was able to adopt a boy that was their own and have him and love him, and not just like all these foster kids going in and out of their life. They wanted a constant in their life, and so which it helped us. It helped him. It helped our kids. In the long run, we just look at it as it's one family under two households. We co-parent kind of. We do all holidays together, all birthdays together. It don't. I mean, for advice, we usually call them. They've lived a happy, good life. And it shows. And that was another thing coming into. They showed us. They let us come into their house. They welcomed us with open arms. My wife a little bit more at first. Well, a lot more at first. They didn't even know me. She was doing the whole clean thing and getting to see the kids, right, while sending me messages saying, "Hey, you need to get your head out of your butt," in more or less terms. But me, I was so mad at her because this kid wasn't mine, and we're not together no more. And that was. This is before we ever got together. I was in the midst of the deepest addiction I've ever been in, and I don't even think I wanted to live around that point of life. Really, I didn't even care. It was such a blur that it almost felt like a kid died. Like you lost a kid. I don't know, and
Appropriate comparison because I feel like that's what it would feel like to feel like you had a kid and then it I think that would feel like kind of getting robbed in some way. So I can I can understand that thought process. How did you and Ashley sort of rectify that with your relationship and move forward?
well, it took a long time. Oh boy, it took a long time because I kind of still always threw it into her face, and because I wasn't ready yet. No, I wasn't ready just to accept that a lot of the stuff that happened was probably some of my fault too. So sometimes I come off pretty aggressive, but back then I was mean. I was mean to a lot of people. Maybe it was just because life wasn't going the way I wanted it to, or
The more I've learned about it, whether it's through my own counseling journey or better understanding mental health and trauma and family dynamics, most of our actions as adults can be explained in some way by our childhood or sort of the ancestry. And sometimes that you have to go back a couple of generations to go, is this a cultural thing? Is this a family dynamic thing that just existed and it became the normal. And when it was my turn to be an adult, it was also that very normal thing that I was accustomed to. Like there's so many layers to it that you could really spend the rest of your life digging into it and fully comprehending. Oh, that's why I do that. It's not even so much a I chose to be this way. It's this I thought that was normal and I just fell into it. And then come to like looking around and ask if I had to poll 20 people and 19 of them think I'm crazy. I'm like, okay, well, I just didn't know any different. And childhood's weird that way, but we don't realize the impact that our childhoods have on us later in life, and it dictates our decisions and our personalities and our tendencies as well. So yeah, it's a fun journey if you want to go down that rabbit hole. It is a rabbit hole because there is always one layer, one level more to dig into it to fully understand what you're going through or the way you make decisions and things like that. So it's interesting. I encourage it, but I also warn people it's a long journey to get to the bottom of that. So if you're looking for specific answers, that you can find them. It's just you need the right counselor and the right ongoing relationship and communication to start to peel that back. Because sometimes we can't solve a problem until we are directly confronted with an element similar to it, and then our brain starts to process in that direction. And so sometimes it's just the right circumstances that start us towards identifying why we do it this way or why we think this way and act this way. And so it's tough. And a lot of people who are around us don't see that. They just see how it is right now. And then
Mm-hmm.
when you find out, oh, it's deeper than that, it's still hard for them to explain because they didn't go through it. It's a difficult thing to relate to for a lot of people. So, what piece of advice would you like to share with people that would encourage people to find recovery?
Hold on, pain ends. I mean, you just take it a day at a time. Sometimes if you have to take it less than a day, you got to take it less than a day, maybe an hour at a time, but get through the struggle and it'll be so much better because it is a struggle staying clean at first. It's hard. You literally have to find the right support. I mean, some people have emotional support dogs or but whatever it may be, whatever you find support in, lean on it and just keep going forward. As long as you don't use for today, tomorrow's going to be better.
Hmm.
And every day gets that much better and easier.
Sean, I appreciate you taking the time right off of a third shift to sit down and chat with me. I really appreciate it. I think your story's awesome, and I'm really psyched for you guys uh, to share this with people and keep on it. And thanks for tuning into the American Recovery Podcast. This episode is the first of 3 parts, where Sean and his wife Ashley will each provide their recovery story, and then a third episode where they speak about how they recovered together, worked their programs to get their kids back, and the people who supported them along the way. Check out the show notes for links to resources and organizations discussed in this episode.